If you watch Jujutsu Kaisen, you'll definitely remember this epic scene of the first time Sukuna opening his domain against the special grade curse. Today, we're gonna recreate the same scene as a full screen loader on the web using React. Check this out.
領域展開福間水し
Now our animation consists of mainly three assets. First is the shrine image, then the image of Sukuna, which is an art I found online, and shout out to the artist, and finally the audio that plays. Now if you were to break down the entire animation, it's just a sequence of steps that happen in sync with the audio. The entire audio itself is 8 seconds long, and we have to make sure it's loaded before we even get started. And we need to make sure Sukuna slides up just before the audio starts playing, because in the first second itself he says domain expansion, in the second the drop sound, third second he says Malevolent Shrine, and in the fourth second is where the shrine appears. So this is the sequence of steps that needs to happen for the whole thing to be complete. So let's get started. Now to save time, I've already scaffolded a React app using Vite and cleared most of the boilerplate code and added our assets inside the public folder so that can be easily referenced. Now I've added a state called show loader, and I've added the title and a button, and on button click I'm setting the show loader to true so that our custom component, which is shrine full screen loader, will be mounted when this is true. And I'm also passing the set loader function of that state into it as a prop. Now in a custom component also, I've added some JSX which contains a div with the class name overlay, the images of Sukuna and shrine. It's did in such a way that the shrine appears as a hero image behind Sukuna and Sukuna is positioned at the bottom. So as far as style is concerned, the overlay div, I've given it a position fixed, made it to take up the whole width and height of the screen, and set the background color to black, and added a display flex and justify the content to flexen so that Sukuna would remain at the bottom and the shrine is made to take 100% width. So the end result would look like this. Let's build the next component of animation, which is the drop ripple animation that happens when the drop sound happens behind Sukuna. Now to achieve this, we are going to make use of the radial gradient function, which helps us to create a radial gradient. It can either be the shape of a circle or an ellipse. We're going to stick with circle, and we can specify the colors at different positions from the center, which is specified by 0%, and 100% means at the boundaries of the circle. So we can specify the colors at each of this position, hence the gradient. So in our case, we need it to be slightly off-white at the center. We need it to appear at the center of the screen and then become transparent as it moves out. Now to kick things off, I'm going to add a div with the class name ripple, and I'm going to position it at the center of the screen. So for the styles, I'm going to add the styles with position absolute top left 50% and translate it so that it appears at the center. Now for the background, let's use the radial gradient property, and I want the shape of the gradient to be a circle, and from the center, which is at 0%, I want it to be slightly off-white. That's why I've used an opacity of 0.65. And then when we are at 30% of the width, I want the whole thing to be transparent. Let's also set a width and a height, which is the full screen size, so that it becomes visible. Now if I go back, you can see the gradient appears with white at the center, slightly off-white at the center, and towards the extremities it becomes transparent. Now we obviously don't want to hardcode the width and height, and we want the circles to move outwards and want to animate that. So let me get rid of the width and height that we hard coded. So let's add some CSS keyframes to animate it. I'm going to call it ripple, and at 0% we start at no width and height and opacity of 1, and we move all the way up to 300% of the screen width and opacity of 0. Then to apply the animation, let me add another class called a ripple1 on this. Let me style it to use the animation. So I'm going to use the animation property and apply the ripple animation. I want the duration of the animation to be 2 seconds, and I'm going to use the ease out so it starts fast and then ends up slow. And then I want it to start at 2 seconds because earlier we had discussed that the drop animation in the audio starts at 2 seconds. Now if we come back and see, let's wait for 2 seconds and boom, there we have. Now to simulate the drip animation, we want multiple circles which starts out at the center and moves out. So I'm going to copy paste this a bunch of times, and I'm just going to change these class names to 3 and 4. Now I'm going to come over to the style sheet and copy these just 3 more times, and then I'm just going to change the class names. And the trick is that it starts at the same time, but we just want the concentric circles to start with the delay. So this one starts at 2.1 seconds. Let's have this start at 2.2, and let this start at 2.3. Let me also ensure that I'm having the forwards in the animation so it doesn't loop, and also we want to make sure that the duration of each of this is increased as well. For example, the second ripple should take 2.5, the third ripple let's have it take 3 seconds, and the final one let's have it take 3.5 seconds so that it simulates that ripple effect in the water. Now if we go back and see, the drip animation happens properly. There we go. Next, let's import the audio, and I'm going to use the HTML audio tag to add it to the SRC. Next, let me also import a bunch of custom hooks from React, notably the useRef, useEffect and useState. Then I'm going to create a ref for controlling the audio element. Then I'm also going to add a state called audio loaded. This is to ensure that the audio is loaded before the animation even start. Now let me attach the ref to the audio element, and also using the onLoaded data function, when the audio loading is complete, I'm going to set the audio loaded state to true, which is initialized to false, so that we know that audio is initialized before starting the animation. Then let me add a useEffect hook, and I'm going to add the audio loaded state to its dependency. Then I'm going to check if the ref has been initialized, that is by checking the current property, and if it is initialized, then I'm going to check if the audio loaded is true, which signifies if the audio loading has been complete. If it is so, then I'm going to start playing with the audio_ref.current.play function. Let me also add a slight delay of 700 milliseconds before the audio starts playing using the setTimeout function. Now if we go back and see, you can see that the audio has been loaded. Next, let's quickly add the text that shows up below. I'm going to have a state called display text, and I'm going to add a DOM element with the class name text with the display text inside. Let's also quickly add some styles to it. I'm going to absolutely position it to the bottom of the screen and just add some generic styles. Now if you remember, when the audio starts, at the first second we want the text to say domain expansion, and in the third second we want to say Malevolent Shrine. So let's do that. So I'm going to do the same thing with setTimeout. In the first second, I'm going to set the display text to domain expansion. Then in the fourth second, I'm going to set it to Malevolent Shrine and let that wait for 2 seconds. And in the 6th second, we're just going to set it to an empty string like this. Let's save and check it out. You can see in the first second it says domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine. There we go. Now let's start animating. We're going to make use of the Framer Motion library in React, and it makes working with animation a lot easier. So we can install it with the npm install Framer Motion command. I've already done it in my system. We're going to start by importing the motion component from Framer Motion. And then let's start by animating the Sukuna image, which appears from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to convert this image into a motion component by doing motion.image. It's all similar to the image tag, but it's supercharged with a lot of animation capabilities. Now every motion component will have an animate prop, what we use to animate the stuff. Then it also has an initial prop, which describes the initial state. Then there is also an exit prop, which describes the animation that happens on the exit. We can animate things very declaratively, and we can make use of the variance prop for doing so. The variant prop expects an object whose keys we can map into each of this animate, initial and exit. So let's do that. I'm just going to call it Sukuna variance for now. We'll create it. Sukuna variance. Next, I'm going to create the object called Sukuna variance. Then it has 3 properties. The first will be the hidden, then there is visible, and then there's exit. Now hidden would specify the initial state of the animation, that is when the element is hidden, and we can animate different properties of it. So for example, in the case of Sukuna, we want it to start at the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to set the Y to 100 Vh, and let's also set the opacity to 0. Visible specify the actual animation that should take place, that is from hidden. So in this case, we want the Y to be 0 from 100 Vh to 0 so that it rises up. Then we also want the opacity to become 1 from 0. We'll also add a transition property, and in that we'll add a delay of 0, which means it will happen immediately, and we'll also set a duration for 1.5 seconds, which means the animation from 100 Vh to 0 when the Sukuna rises up will take a duration of 1.5 seconds. Similarly on exit, we want the image to go to an opacity of 0, that is it disappears, and then I'll also add a transition, and in that let's have a delay of 0.5 seconds. Now back to a Sukuna motion component. In this, the animation, the property we need to animate is visible, which is the visible from our Sukuna variance object, this particular one. The initial state should be hidden, so we'll give the initial be hidden, and on exit we want it to be exit, so we'll just give exit. Now let's test it out quickly, and there we go. Sukuna rises from the top and the animation plays. Note the exit doesn't work right now, but we need to use the animate presence for that we'll get to later. Now we're gonna do the same thing for the shrine as well. So I'm gonna first convert it to a motion component. I'm just gonna copy paste this so that it's all similar, and instead of the Sukuna variance, I'm gonna call it shrine variance. Now I'm gonna create the shrine variance and add the hidden, the visible, and the exit properties. Now with the hidden, which is the initial state, we want the shrine to have an opacity of 0 because it should be hidden. And then when it's visible, the opacity should be 1. And then I'm gonna add a transition delay of 4.8 seconds. We want the shrine itself to show at the 4th second, but the audio itself is loaded with a delay of 700 milliseconds, so that's why a 0.8 extra is added. And when it's exiting, I'm gonna make the opacity 0 again, and then add a small delay of 0.5 seconds. So I'm gonna save this. Let's try it out. Now finally, when the animation is complete, we want the shrine loader component to be unmounted and disappear, and the initial screen to be shown. For that, let's make use of the set loading function which we passed as a prop, and we're gonna use the set timeout with a delay of 9 seconds, and then in that we're gonna set the set loading to false. Now let's save and try it. Perfect. Now it disappears, but you notice the animation exit ones are not even working and it just abruptly disappeared. So we have to fix that. Now luckily, Framer Motion provides us with the AnimatePresence higher order components, which helps us to animate a component when they are removed from the React tree. Now this is required because React lacks a lifecycle method that notifies the components when they're going to be unmounted, and then that allows us to defer that until a certain operation is completed, like an animation. Let's start by importing the AnimatePresence higher order component, and I'm also going to create a new state called show animation, which will help us to unmount the React tree. Now I'm going to take the entire React tree that we have in the JSX, cut it out, create the AnimatePresence higher order component, and then inside it show the React tree only if the show animation state is true. So I'm just going to paste that. There we go. And the final step would be to set the show animation to false once the audio playing and the animation is complete. So I'm just going to do that, set show animation to false, and I'm going to do that at the 8th second, and the entire component being unmounted, that is the set loading. Let's delay it to 1 more second, so that will be 10 seconds. Now let's save and try it out. With that, it's complete. We got a smooth fade out animation when the animation was finished. Jujutsu Kaisen has got to be one of my all-time favorite animes, and I had so much fun building this, and I hope you all did too. Do leave a like and let me know your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below, and as always, thanks for watching.